Welcome to the Omega Beam, episode 22. I'm your host, Orrin Merton, and if you've been listening to any of the previous 21 episodes, you know that the theme song was different and the name was different. It's because I've changed the podcast to be the Omega Beam, and now it is laser focused on discussing TV and film and video in the science fiction and fantasy and superhero realm. So along those lines, the inaugural episode of the Omega Beam is a panel discussion with Golden about Ant-Man and the Wasp, the latest Marvel superhero movie. If you haven't seen it, then go out and see it first, because as with all panels I do, there are gonna be lots and lots of spoilers here. So if you don't want the movie spoiled, then see it first, then come back and listen. All right, with no further ado, here is the Ant-Man and the Wasp panel. And here we are to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp. I'm here with Golden. Hi, Golden.
Hello, Orrin.
So what did you think of Ant-Man and the Wasp?
In one word, fun.
It was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. I think both of us had the experience with the first Ant-Man, that we walked in with no expectations particularly and really enjoyed it.
Well, I didn't know what the first one even was, so my first experience of Ant-Man was just catching, probably the last 75% on TV once, and after watching it, I was like, I need to see this.
Right.
And you know how cable works.
Sure.
I had cable at the time, so every time Ant-Man's on, oh no, I have to watch this. Oh, no, I'm gonna have to watch this. I have to watch it, and it's a fun movie.
It was.
And the second one did not disappoint.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience with the first one, in that I was just sort of home, didn't have much to do, and I was like, why don't I rent this? And so I rented Ant-Man. I was like, wow, this is really good. I'm going to buy this and watch it again and again and again.
I don't know a lot about the different comics, and I don't know a lot about the different history. So as much as I enjoy comic book movies and the superheroes, I go into it with more of a blank slate. So I don't have as many expectations as diehard fans.
Right.
As diehards that they know this is what happened to him, and this is when it happened, it's supposed to happen, and all of that. So I don't need that. It's just, it was a lot of fun just to watch a movie that everyone was having fun.
Right.
Even when they're in the middle of a battle, there's still this underlying, this is fun.
I think one of the things we're missing, and boy, this is, I've said over and over again, it's something that was sorely and completely lacking in Batman v Superman and some of the DC ones. There was never a sense of joy in any of those movies. There was no sense of that Superman, for example, was the happy warrior, that he was a joyful warrior. He could be out doing whatever he wanted to do, but he was doing what was right. He was being a hero because that gave him inner joy. Instead, he was sitting around thinking, do I really want to do this? And you really got the feeling that there's nothing Scott Lang wanted to do more than to be Ant-Man. And in fact, the very beginning of the entire movie, he's with his daughter, and he's made this entire play diorama out of his house where they're pretending to be on an Ant-Man adventure in the mini world. And it just sets up from the very first second, this is someone who loves being Ant-Man.
Well, he doesn't just love being Ant-Man. He loves his daughter,
right,
and he loves his life now. He loves the job that he's trying to create, even though the business is about to go under and all of that. We don't actually know if he was aware of that.
Right.
That might have been something that was being kept from him. But there's just this sense, and they started this with the first movie, and I know that we've talked about this aside, is the fact that there's no real hate. There's not.
Yeah.
It's even the tension that he had with his ex-wife's husband in the first movie. By the end of the movie, it was like, no, you know what? We don't need to hate each other. We can all work towards the same goals, and it's nice to see a movie in which those relationships can be so strong, they can be cooperative, and everyone is helping each other.
Sure, and in the first movie, they made it pretty clear that the stepfather, the ex-wife's new husband, his sort of dismissal of Scott was based on disappointment. That he was just disappointed that Scott was this intelligent guy. He'd had a white-collar job and security, all these things. Instead, he's doing time in prison because he committed a crime. And it wasn't one of those things where he wasn't framed. He did it. He really did it.
And he takes
Yeah,
responsibility.
and he takes responsibility for it.
He takes responsibility for that. He takes responsibility for the fact that he stole the Ant-Man suit and
Right.
decided to go to the airport and participate in that. And
Right.
so he's like, no, I want to be responsible. He's kidnapped. And still like, no, I need to be at home. I need to finish my
Right.
my time at home so I can be free and I can move on.
Right.
And that's always in the back of his head that there's this responsibility that he needs to play out first, but he still has that struggle with, but I still want to be Ant-Man. Okay, Ant-Man, house arrest. Ant-Man, house arrest. And you gotta wonder. I mean, as soon as I saw the ant with a little monitor on his
Right.
ankle, how did they manage that? Did she have to shrink Scott while enlarging the ant at the same time to take his place? Because if she disconnected it, then it would have
Right.
disconnected. So how did they really make that exchange?
You know, I think that was probably one of the things we were just
We're just
not
gonna
meant
let-
to.
just
We're
let
just
that
not
go.
meant to think about that too much.
Okay.
But yeah, there's always stuff like that. We talked about we started talking about the relationships and the characters, and that leads into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the relationships between all the characters, between Scott and his ex-wife, his daughter, between Hope Van Dyne, between Henry Pym, everybody. What did you think of the relationships? Hank, yes. Hank.
You're still on Superman v Superman.
That's right.
Superman v Batman and Henry Cavill.
Yeah. So, what did you think? How did you think the relationships were handled in this movie?
I like that they were on the outs and he's not supposed to have any communication with them, and they're still drawn to each other, but she's
Sure.
supposed to be angry with him and she wants to be angry with him, but there's this that she still kind of wants to have him involved.
Right. And she still really likes him. I mean,
She
it's
still really
clear-
likes him and he still really likes her. And
Right. And I thought it was interesting that, yeah, they're supposed to have no contact and all of this stuff, and they're on the outs, and yet they still gave him a specially encrypted phone that he could use just to talk to them that was hidden and everything else. So, clearly they were upset with each other, but they all knew it wasn't going to be
And
the end.
all of the characters, even if it's just a small little part, they have layers.
Right.
I
They're all
mean,
very well drawn.
You've got to like Pym's character, and it's like the other two characters are going in, and he's like, well, hey, when you two are done like doing this, can we maybe get back to the fact that this is what we're supposed to be doing?
Right. Well,
And there's that underlying humor, and just I think that's more realistic of what would actually happen instead of things being so perfect.
right. And in fact, they never really had a villain in this movie. The antagonist, Ghost, was in fact not a villain. Ava was not so much a villain. She was desperate. She was dying, and she wanted to steal, Hank's tech in order to help herself. But she wasn't a bad person. Even if there was really no big bad, but Sonny Birch, the black marketeer, the black market tech dealer, is as close as you get. And even he wasn't evil. He was just a black marketeer who was just into profit, and he wasn't trying to kill people. He was just trying to get what he wanted and get out.
Yes.
So, he was really more comic relief.
They needed a little bit extra. You have someone who's desperate and dying, and she's going to do anything that she can to try and live. Although she's reasonable when she's talking to the other Lawrence Fishburne's character, Dr. Bill Foster. She's still reasonable and listening to what he has to say, but she's desperate. But you needed a little bit more, and he provided that just little bit more. Something to just mess them up.
And it did create this kind of Keystone Cops, chase at the end where you've got the FBI chasing Hank and Scott. You've got the Black Marketeers also chasing Hank and Scott.
And I'm sorry. What is more fun than being a giant and then using a truck as a scooter?
That was a pretty amazing scene.
It's fun.
Right. And at the same time, I think they walked this fine line really well where if you make a movie too slapstick, there's no stakes. Because at that point, everyone knows, oh, ha, 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 this is just a comedy. Everything's going to be fine. We don't have to worry about anything. But they also wanted you to feel like, oh, my God, Hank's in danger. He's too small to jump out of the quantum realm. And so they did manage to walk that line where it was just grounded enough to have real stakes where these characters could get seriously hurt or trapped, or worse, while still keeping the humor and keeping it light. This was not an epic movie like Avengers. This is not the fate of all that lives in this universe was at
Jeopardy.
Jeopardy.
It is. If he gets a hold of that technology and he sells it to the wrong person, they could use this quantum technology to kill everyone. So there is that. But you have that one character being black and white. This is what he wants. This is what he's going to do to get it. You have Ghost, who's not black and white because she thinks that the only way for her to live is to harness this quantum energy or to help stabilize her. And even at the very last moment, Dr. Hank Pym is going in. He's been betrayed by Dr. Bill Foster. Ghost has basically taken him out a couple times, and he's just trying to get to his wife. And he's still like, when I get back, we will try and figure out a way to save her. It's right. Still these are good. Yeah. It's cooperative. It's not, well, you know what, you hit me, so you're gonna go to hell, and I'm never gonna want to ever see you again. And then
at the very, very end, even after the movie's done and we're watching the after credits scene, you see that Hank, Janet, Hope, and Scott are going out of their way to help Ava, to help Ghost. That their entire mission at this point is now to help her. They are very sympathetic. The antagonist is very sympathetic. I don't want to call her a villain because I don't think she was a villain. I think that one of Marvel's problems, if you will, with the exception of Loki, and in the television world, possibly with the exception of the television world of David Tennant's Kilgrave, Marvel's villains tend to be the mustache twirling, over the top villain, and I think that it was nice that this movie didn't have that it broke the mold and didn't have that mustache twirling uber evil.
It was a sad circumstance.
Yeah, it was just somebody caught in a bad situation.
Just like you have Janet caught in the quantum realm.
Yeah. And even Janet, is happy to help this woman.
And then you talked about how at the end of the movie, Scott's in the quantum realm, and you're trying to figure out, well, how is he going to get out? And I think that I was looking at some other people's comments, and I think what someone else was saying, and this is where I think it's going to go, is that Ghost or Ava does know that this is what they're doing. So maybe
Ghost pulls him out.
She'll figure that out, that he's still in there. Either that, or he'll somehow figure out a way that he has to get himself back.
I can think of a couple ways they could bring him back in Avengers 4 or an after credits scene or whatever. I'm guessing he shows up in Avengers 4. I think it would be perfectly plausible for Ava to go in after him and drag him out. I think maybe he could find his own way out. It's possible that Captain Marvel, who is, supposed to be the most powerful character that they've got, the hero that they've got in their Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's possible that Captain Marvel will know about his whereabouts and pull him out. So I can think of a few ways, but I thought it was really cool that, first of all, they did that to tie it into the Avengers movie, but second of all, that they left it as an after credit scene. I saw some people saying, "Why did you make that an after credit scene?" But I'm glad they did, because the entire story of the movie is complete without it. You don't need that piece to have a complete story in the film. And that is for those of us who have seen them all and are seeing the Avengers and everything else. That's great. I'm glad it's part of it. But it didn't need to be part of the movie itself. So I thought they did that. I thought they did that right. Speaking of going back to relationships for a second, one of the criticisms of the first one was that the relationship between Scott and Hope the critics thought that it seemed fairly flat. I don't agree. I think it was what it needed to be.
I think it was consistently building up through the movie. I think she was trying not to like him.
Yeah.
In the first movie.
Because she wanted
She didn't want to like him.
And she wanted the costume. I mean, she wanted to go in. She very clearly wanted to be the one to do all this, and was really upset with her father that he found a substitute. But I do think in this movie, I thought their relationship, it was very warm. I thought it was both handled well. It was completely plausible. I felt that any criticism anybody would have from the relationship in the first one was gone in this one.
And I like the fact that she kind of treats him as a child, like he just needs to behave and do what he's told to do.
Right. Well, it's they make it clear that although Scott is not an unintelligent man, I mean, obviously he's involved in cyber technology and cybersecurity. I mean, this is a bright human being, that he doesn't really know about what they're doing. These are like scientists at the very top of their game. And he is a very smart techie dude. But still, there's a difference between being, a smart computer programmer and one of the very top quantum scientists on the planet. And I think that their sort of condescension of him, it makes sense, and it's also kind of amusing.
And, talk about the casting. The casting was really well done.
Absolutely.
And speaking of the characters, one of my favorite parts is, they capture the one guy and they're about to give him the truth serum, Luis.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Luis is just going to give him up so easy. And then I'm reminded that's right. With Luis, there are stories. And this is not going to go as quickly or as expected with the antagonist. Because, and you had mentioned that this was very, true to the culture, because you said that for that community, that artist, because you were saying
right, this is a fun little aside. Now, as a gothling from the 80s and 90s, of course, love Morrissey. Smiths were a huge impact, and Morrissey solo was great, and Morrissey always had an outsized following among Latino in California and in Mexico and Latin America, much outsized compared to the rest of the U.S. And so it was just, and all these characters are of the age that in the 90s that would have been the music of their teenagehood and the stuff they really love. And so he makes an aside that his grandmother had a jukebox that was all Morrissey. And from that moment on, every time he was talking, you heard Morrissey. All the ringtones on his phone were Morrissey. And it's a little thing, but it was really grounded, because a Latino of his age, that would have probably been one of his favorite artists.
And I just love the whole, hey, this is a truth serum. And the guy's like, no, this is not a truth serum. And then by the end, it's like, yeah, no. Yeah, this is the truth serum. And there's just all of these little, him, like him swimming under the water, even. Right. And oh, we think we see a whale. It's a whale. It's not a whale. And there's just a lot of little elements that just were built in seamlessly.
Sure.
I know one of the other things that you said that was really nice was the fact that they were able to film it on location.
Right, they filmed it in actual San Francisco. So for those people who know San Francisco, know Lombard Street, that was the real one. It was not done in a studio. It was not against a green screen. And it just gives it as, I always think it really helps sell the fantasy when they can add as much reality as possible. And so they're really driving the streets of San Francisco, and it makes a difference. It makes it seem much more real.
And I like the fact that his daughter is kind of in on everything. I mean,
Sure.
she's told him, she said, you need to go do this. You need to be the good guy. You need to
Right.
be. And so she's on the inside on this one, so she kind of knows what's going on while her mom and stepdad are getting caught up. But even then, they're still willing to help him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's I think this was the right movie to follow Avengers Infinity War with, because with Avengers you had this really epic, heavy, dark movie that ends, first of all, on a major cliffhanger, but second of all, on kind of this depressing, shocking cliffhanger. How nice to sort of end the year of Marvel movies with this light movie. You know, this movie that's just filled with good feeling. So
And I'm looking forward to what's going to come up, because I'm a fan of Michelle Pfeiffer. I like Michelle Pfeiffer.
Sure, absolutely.
I like a lot of the movies she's done, and to see her in this, and they've said, she even says it's changed her.
Right.
And the only thing that we've seen on how it's changed her so far is the fact that she was able to heal Ava, or was she? Was it a temporary fix?
Right. I'm guessing it was temporary because they need to get more particles for her. So.
And I think that we haven't tapped into exactly how it's changed her yet.
Right. Well, I'm guessing they're going to keep making these movies as long as people keep seeing them. And given the fact that this has been the #1 movie for like 1 or 2 weeks now, that bodes well for sequels. This will definitely end up in my iTunes library without a doubt. This is something I can just watch again and again and again. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for chatting about it.
You are very welcome.
And that's it for this episode. I hope you really enjoyed the panel. We enjoyed having the discussion. If you'd like to find out more about Ant-Man and the Wasp with some links, please check out the show notes either in your podcast app or at theomegabeam.com/22. If you liked this episode, please leave a review in the Apple Podcasts app or iTunes or wherever you're listening to podcasts. It really helps people discover this podcast. And if you have any comments or questions or suggestions maybe for panels that you'd like us to do, please email at info@theomegabeam.com. Thanks again. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll be back next time after San Diego Comic-Con.